Hi guys, welcome back. I am Nick. This is Cassiotti News, and we are bringing you today 3 sides to 3 separate topics. If you haven't seen the first couple, they are linked right above here. We have a Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian today, so let's hear from them. Our third topic, COVID is raging at historic highs. What are we to expect, Rocco, from the Biden administration now that they have taken over?
Well, this topic has been my obsession for almost 10 months now, so I've been really viewing this closely, and everything I'm seeing from the administration and those informing it right now is telling me that they are planning on winding this scamdemic down by June or July. And when I call it a scamdemic, I'm not saying COVID isn't real. I'm not saying COVID isn't killing people. What I am saying is that within an hour of Joe Biden being inaugurated, the World Health Organization came out and said that the number of PCR testing cycles on many COVID tests is too high, which means that we are creating a huge number of false positives with the way we do testing, something Dr. Scott Atlas was saying months ago. The next day, we find out that Johnson & Johnson's vaccine may be approved by the end of the month. The CDC said in December that if you are asymptomatic, you do not need a COVID test. The day after electoral certification was filed, Andrew Cuomo came out and said that we cannot stay closed until the COVID vaccine hits a critical mass. The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, the people who do the model upon which our COVID response is based, are now saying the COVID deaths will hit an all-time pandemic low in April and be down to 204 deaths a day by May 1st. The literal day after the AP called the election for Joe Biden, Pfizer and Moderna announced that they have vaccines which had passed phase 3 clinical trials. I mean, listen,
Rocco, I want to bring up the counterpoint, right?
Yeah.
I'm non-biased. I want to get information out of you. As a business owner myself, I can't predict when the news is going to release whatever the news is going to do. If I have a product coming to market and we're pushing it out as quickly as possible and we're able to push it out on whatever day that may be, January 21st, it just so happens to be the inauguration. I mean, are those coincidences? I mean, you're kind of verging on conspiracy.
Oh, I'm not urging on it. This is a conspiracy theory. There are people who have conspired here to essentially deprive us of our liberty for months on end unnecessarily with mitigation efforts which have been proven not to work for the purposes of winning an election, tanking an economy, and depriving Donald Trump of his best talking point going into the election, which was that we were having excellent growth rates at the time. I mean, look, all you have to do is look at the states that all three of us are in right now to see that the mitigation efforts don't work. Florida is a mostly free state. Now, I realize that there are private, measures that people are putting in. I realize most people are still wearing masks in Florida. I realize that there are still some of these measures. But Florida is not the lockdown utopia or dystopia, I should say, that New York is, or that I'm presuming Washington is. And yet, New York has higher caseload, higher hospitalizations, higher death rate, and isn't yet on the other side of their spike, whereas Florida is. So to me, the proof is in the pudding. The numbers show you that this isn't working, and it's a perfect example of how the media doesn't report the truth.
Sydney, we're looking at historic highs of COVID right now. What is Biden walking into?
Oh my goodness, where do I start? Well, Biden is walking into a COVID response that was, completely and utterly botched by the previous administration. If we had gone on lockdown, if we had had mask mandates for, long enough time at the beginning of the pandemic in March, we wouldn't be in the same boat that we are now. We wouldn't have 408,000 Americans dead from a virus, that was completely preventable in the first place. If, the proper policy had been put in place by the Trump administration, from the get-go. The Biden administration is going to be committed to listening to actual science, not having Dr. Fauci around and then, just not listening to what he has to say, even though he's a doctor. He's the leading infectious disease specialist in the country. And, Trump had politicians leading the COVID response, not an actual doctor.
Well, regardless of the states that we're looking at, you have the privilege of being in Florida, where there is hardly any mandates, whereas Rocco and Jacob are in states that have very, very strict mandates, and in both instances, the data is proving that there, yes, is a spike in COVID. So is the data wrong in these particular locations by saying that lockdowns and enhanced measures don't work?
I mean, I wouldn't call living in Florida right now a privilege. I think that, my state has botched the COVID response. The reason why, a lot of the activity in the state, won't be able to return back to normal is because there are still COVID deaths happening. People are still dying every single day from a virus that would have been completely preventable if the response was properly handled from the beginning. And that's why I think that it's infuriating, to many Americans that, other countries have already gone back to normal life. They don't have to wear masks. Everyone can go around and have public gatherings, concerts, all the fun things that we missed before COVID. But the United States is stuck behind the rest of the world because, we couldn't step up to the plate when it was time to dealing with this pandemic from the beginning, instead of dealing with, all of the deaths that have happened, ICUs maxing out. Florida, I'm not exactly sure what the current numbers are right now, but last time I checked, Florida was third for COVID cases in the country. And I think that if all of this was handled from the beginning, then hundreds of thousands of lives would have been saved. And I think that all of those people saying that, it's a conspiracy, COVID isn't as bad as people are saying it is, I think that that's completely ignoring, medical science and actual facts.
The main question was, what are we to expect from the Biden administration now that they're taking over this crisis?
People that are in office seek power, so they're going to try to do everything to convince us that they're needed. That's their complete existence. If we don't need them, then they're useless to us. They're just running around making a bunch of noise.
Do we not have a health crisis?
We do have a health crisis, but we've had a health crisis in the past. We've had health crisis all the time. I mean, I'm not going to go down the road quite conspiracy theory, but what I can tell you is I have cousins in Sweden. I have cousins in Iceland. I know friends in Italy, and I know friends in Spain. I also have friends in France. And what I'm hearing from them directly is what Sydney said is pretty much an out and out lie. When they came into Spain and Italy, they locked everybody down, draconian, like just no one on the streets. Like people were, you do not leave your house, period. Then they started to open back up with a mask mandate very slowly. Boom, it spiked. Now, according to two friends of mine that both happen to be infectious disease people, one headed up, and I can't mention her name because I promised her I wouldn't. She worked with Fauci back in the AIDS, and it's not the Judy person that everybody's going to think I'm talking about. I also agree with her because this person and her worked side by side with Fauci. Fauci is probably one of the most corrupt people I've ever looked into in my life. If you go down that hole in the racism and the disgusting thing he did to the gay community, that man should be put on trial for atrocities. And the people that have been completely shunned from making epidemiologists, infectious disease people, the people that worked at the CDC that quit because of Fauci, because he politicized viruses. I know these people directly, and I was around for some of that.
So do you think that Biden is going to be locking down the country? I mean, he just signed an executive order for mask mandates for 100 days.
Right.
If it was to the points that you're bringing up, are we going to be actually locking back down like we saw in March for that 2-week period? Or is it just going to be this mask mandate? I mean, what are we to expect, Jacob?
I believe what's going to happen is, first of all, it's going to be challenged at the Supreme Court level. Now, he can mandate, technically, he can mandate federal land, which he did. He's easing into it, I can tell. But what he can't do is tell the governors of each state what to do. So that'll be challenged on grounds of constitutionality. It will be no, it won't happen. It is kind of a fearful thing. And also the other thing that kind of unnerved me was that he kind of hinted at vaccination and everybody needs to get one. I'm going to tell you something about modern day vaccinations. I'm not putting that crap in my body. I know 2 epidemiologists, and I know what those things can potentially do to you. And so for me, I want to see proof in the pudding first. Second of all, politicizing this, which he will definitely politicize. He's a politician. That's what they do. And he will seek to be the savior, and everybody else will fall in line. And one more thing, WHO literally came out and said, do not lock down people. They literally came out and said that. But since Trump wasn't playing with WHO, the CDC ignored it. I watched this all go on. There's no theory here. And then now that we signed back up with WHO, now Joe Biden is following their suggestions all of a sudden. So whether that's a change of presidency or power or whatever, doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't matter to me. When you don't listen, go ahead.
So Rocco, I saw you shaking your head yes to a lot of the points that Jacob's bringing up. I want to get to you, but while it's fresh, Sydney, I want you to respond because you were shaking your head no to the points that he was bringing up. So I'll start with Sydney. We'll go to Rocco, and we'll finish out with Jacob for the audience that's following along. So go ahead, Sydney.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, I do believe that Jacob is speaking off of, conspiracy. And, the facts are with a respiratory illness that, you need to reduce your contact with people around you. Social distancing works. Masks are proven to work. Being told to wear a mask isn't an infringement on, your individual rights as a person. We're asked to wear seatbelts when we drive cars to protect us. Masks are a similar premise to that. And if you're protecting yourself and others around you, how is that an infringement on, your liberties when you're just doing a civil duty?
Sure. And I'm not here to attack. I'm here to get more out of you on your point, right? So the counterpoint to that, a Republican would say, okay, if you're going to analogize putting your seatbelt on to wearing a mask, they're going to say, well, let's use the analogy of obesity kills 300,000 people yearly, every year, not 300,000 people 1 year, but every year. So their counterpoint would be, well, look, we don't take drastic measures when it comes to obesity or anything else like that, which are, again, diseases that are very mainstream. So, we're looking at this in a lot of different ways. As a Democrat, what are we to expect from Biden and his administration?
Well, what we're to expect from Biden and his administration is, the comprehensive COVID plan that, we should have had from the beginning. A plan based on science, not politics, starting with a mask mandate on all federal property, mask mandates on public transportation throughout the country, including trains, buses, subways, things like that, as well as a vaccination campaign to meet the goal of 100 million vaccines in his first 100 days in office. That's enough for 50 million Americans to receive 2 doses of the vaccine. And, signing 10 executive orders and actions that will help handle COVID, properly, the way that it should have been dealt with from the beginning. There is no clause in Biden's COVID plan to have a mass lockdown like we did last March, even though, in my opinion, I think that would be, effective in slowing the spread of the virus and, reducing the lives lost to COVID. Because the reality is until people wear masks and until we reduce contact with each other, this virus isn't going anywhere.
Rocco, I'm going to let you respond, and then we'll close out the section with Jacob. Go ahead, Rocco.
Yeah, so I think I just had 2 points for Sydney and 1 for Jacob. For Sydney, on the point of that if we went on lockdown and did masks early enough, things would have gotten better and things would have improved. Well, when you look at the examples of Los Angeles County, New York City, These are places which masked earlier than anyone. I was being forced into a mask mandate by mid-April, and they closed everything, and they had the worst outbreaks in the nation, as well as the worst second waves in the nation. And if these mitigation efforts worked, then that wouldn't have happened. If they made any difference at all, then we wouldn't have seen the exact same curve in basically every state within certain regions, which is what you see when you look at hospitalizations per state, when you look at case rates per state. They go down together, they go up together by region. This is a regional spread. It has nothing to do with the actual mitigation efforts, and that's why places like South Dakota, places like Sweden did not do significantly worse than their peers, even though they were told that with no mitigation force, which is what they did, they would end up with tons and tons of deaths, exponentially more than their neighbors. The second point is that I just point out to you that we've shut down the world economy here over a virus which they say has killed 2 million people on a planet of 8 billion. And there's a lot of controversy as to whether those numbers are even real, given that a lot of these people are being counted as dying with COVID and not from COVID. But I'd point out that we literally had Woodstock in 1969 during the Hong Kong flu, which killed, there's estimates between 1 and 4 million people on a planet of 3.6 billion. So the Hong Kong flu, even on the low end estimates, was more deadly. Not to mention it actually harmed young people in large numbers, which COVID really does not. And the last thing I would say, because I feel like I directed most of my responses towards Sydney, I would say to Jacob a little bit of a challenge for the future for the Libertarian Party addressed to you. The Libertarian Party should have won votes from people like me this year. This was the greatest infringement on liberty, on basic civil liberties since Jim Crow. And the nominees for president did not do nearly enough. The national chairman did not do nearly enough. These people were pathetic on this issue. They talked more about Black Lives Matter than they did about people losing their businesses. And I can tell by the look on your face that you probably agree with me here. But I would just encourage you. You know, I saw that Angela McArdle was on a previous edition of this show, and she's running for the chair of the Libertarian Party. And she has been one of the most consistent and excellent voices on opposing the lockdown and using the Libertarian Party for what it should be used for, which is to defend against encroachments on our liberty like this. So I would just encourage you to be a vocal voice for being more vocal on the lockdown. And I don't know who you're supporting, but I definitely like Angela a lot.
We're gonna let Jacob respond to this, but I do want to put a PSA in there that if you are feeling any symptoms or if you need medical attention in any way, shape, or form, please seek out the proper channels to that. Please call 911. Please get looked at any channel. So that includes mental wellness. That also includes suicide prevention. So in any channel, in any form of any type of medical condition, please seek the proper channels to get looked at and to make sure that you are keeping yourself healthy. But go ahead, Jacob. I'm going to let you respond and close out the segment.
All right, great. Okay, first of all, I will speak within my scope of expertise. But before I do that, I will say this, that the protocol for social distancing and masks and locking down was a third place, fourth grade assessment of a pandemic. Not lying, look it up. I'm not kidding. Okay, that's not conspiracy. Another thing that isn't conspiracy is how viruses like this work. How these things work is they work towards an ability to be able to survive as long as they can in the human body. They become less deadly over time. And we can see this with flus. We can see this with colds. That's science. We have proof of this. We have proof of this with Ebola, the worst contagion, one of the worst things that will devastate villages and then disappear. And as time's gone on, it's become less and less deadly. These are people that work with Ebola, literally saying this. So that's BS. Locking down can potentially make things 10 times worse, which we saw in Spain and Italy. I lost track. So basically what I'm saying is that I'm not trying to politicize this. I don't have a bone in this fight. I could care less. And by the way, I don't believe in mandated seatbelts either. So that's kind of arguments out. We have them. I don't agree with them. I don't think you should tell me how to dress. I don't think you should tell me. You have no business in my life. I own myself.
In
and
the
you can't have it
Constitution,
both
Jacob,
ways.
I mean, I don't have to remind you
Yeah,
of it. You know it very clearly. The
no,
Constitution says that the United States government does have a responsibility to the wellness of the people. I mean, is this not a
no.
responsibility of the government to the wellness of the people, the general
No,
welfare?
no. Wellness and general welfare. And if you take a look at the time that those documents were just like misdemeanor in the document itself, this is
Mhm.
something that is my expertise. It does not mean what people think it means nowadays. That's not what it is. Wellness means the freedom to be able to move freely. And wellness, not wellness. It's well. What did you say? The
General
last thing.
welfare, general
General
well-being.
welfare. Yes, that is in there, and that is to be able to get you to that point. There is nothing that the founders would be rolling over in their graves if they thought that the government was going to give medical advice. Thank you very much. I can say that with all confidence. Any one of them would be like, "What? You're not my doctor. Screw off." That is a fact, and I can back it up, but I don't have enough time at my leisure to do.
All
So
right. Well, we appreciate the
yeah,
guests. We appreciate their points. If you agree or disagree, put your notes in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one. Hit that subscribe button. Share us on social media.